just after 7 in the morning on June 30th, 1908, something extraordinary happened in the remote wilderness of Siberia. A blast so powerful, it flattened 800 square miles of forest, yet left behind no crater, no fragments, and no satisfactory explanation. What could cause such devastating destruction while leaving scientists baffled for over a century? Please follow us for more stories at pastexplode.com. The morning had started like any other for the scattered populations living along the Podkamenya Tunguska River. Reindeer herders, fur trappers, and indigenous Evenk people went about their daily routines in this vast expanse of taiga forest. But at exactly 7:14 local time, their world changed forever. Semyon Semenov, a farmer sitting on his porch 40 miles south of the blast site, would later describe feeling an intense heat wash over his face as if his shirt had caught fire. The heat was so overwhelming, he thought his buildings might burst into flames. Then came the wind, a force so violent it knocked him clean off his porch and left him unconscious. But Semenov was one of the lucky ones. He lived to tell his story. Closer to the epicenter, the indigenous Evenk people reported seeing a brilliant blue-white fireball streak across the morning sky. It moved with such speed that many described it as brighter than the sun itself. The object appeared to grow larger and larger until it seemed to fill the entire horizon. Then came the explosion. The blast was heard over 600 miles away. In the town of Kansk, nearly 400 miles south, residents reported windows shattering and buildings shaking as if struck by an earthquake. Seismic monitoring stations across Europe and Asia detected the tremors. In England, barometric equipment recorded atmospheric pressure waves that had traveled halfway around the world. But perhaps most disturbing of all were the accounts from those who witnessed the immediate aftermath. The few Evenk families camping within 30 miles of the blast described a wall of fire racing toward them through the forest. Trees, some over a century old, were snapped like matchsticks. Reindeer were thrown through the air. The very ground beneath their feet seemed to ripple like water. One Evenk man named Chuchan later told researchers how he watched the forest around him simply vanish. Not burned, not chopped down, but instantaneously flattened in a perfect radial pattern, as if some giant hand had pressed down from the sky with unimaginable force. For 19 years, the chaos of the Russian Revolution and World War I kept scientists away from this remote corner of Siberia. It wasn't until 1927 that the first scientific expedition, led by mineralogist Leonid Kulik, finally reached the blast site. What Kulik found defied everything he expected. 800 square miles of forest lay flattened in an almost perfect butterfly pattern. 80 million trees had been knocked down, all pointing radially outward from a central point. But at the very center, where Kulik expected to find a massive crater from a meteorite impact, there was nothing. No crater, no fragments, no evidence of anything having actually struck the ground. Even stranger, the trees directly at ground zero were still standing. Stripped of branches and bark, these ghostly wooden pillars rose like monuments in the center of complete devastation. It was as if the explosion had occurred not on the ground, but several miles above it. Kulik spent years searching for meteorite fragments. He drained swamps, excavated suspicious holes, and analyzed soil samples. He found nothing. No unusual metals, no space rock, no physical evidence of what had caused the most powerful explosion in recorded human history. The scientific community was baffled. The blast had released energy equivalent to 10 to 15 million tons of TNT. To put that in perspective, this was nearly 1,000 times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Yet, unlike any known meteorite impact, it had left no lasting physical trace. As decades passed, theories multiplied. Some scientists proposed it was indeed a meteorite, but one made of ice that completely vaporized upon entering Earth's atmosphere. Others suggested it was a comet, its loose composition explaining why no solid fragments survived. But more exotic explanations emerged. In the 1940s, science fiction writer and biochemist Isaac Asimov proposed it might have been antimatter from space. When antimatter meets regular matter, both are completely annihilated in a burst of pure energy. This would explain the total absence of debris. The 1960s brought even wilder theories. Some suggested it was an alien spacecraft that exploded while attempting to land. Others proposed it was an early nuclear experiment gone wrong, somehow transported through time. A few even claimed it was evidence of a parallel universe briefly intersecting with our own. Soviet scientists in the 1960s added another layer to the mystery. They reported finding microscopic spherules of unusual metals scattered throughout the blast zone. These tiny spheres contained rare elements like iridium and osmium, in concentrations far higher than normally found on Earth. But these findings have never been satisfactorily explained or independently verified. Environmental studies revealed another puzzle. Trees that grew after 1908 showed dramatically accelerated growth rates, as if the explosion had somehow enriched the soil. Plant mutations were documented well into the 1960s. Some researchers claimed to find elevated radiation levels, though others disputed these measurements. Indigenous Evank oral traditions add yet another dimension to the mystery. For generations, they had spoken of Ogdi, a vengeful god who lived in the underworld. According to their beliefs, the explosion was Ogdi breaking through the earth to punish those who had disrespected the land. Some elders claimed similar, smaller events had occurred in the distant past, always in remote areas where few witnesses survived to tell the tale. Modern computer simulations and satellite analysis have provided new insights, but no definitive answers. Most scientists today favor the comet theory. A comet, they argue, could have exploded in the atmosphere with enough force to cause the observed destruction while leaving no crater. The ice and rock would have vaporized completely, explaining the absence of debris. But questions remain. Why was there no visible trail across the night sky on previous evenings, as would be expected from an approaching comet? Why do eyewitness descriptions vary so dramatically about what they actually saw? And why, more than a century later, do we still find new anomalies each time we study the site more carefully? Recent expeditions have used ground-penetrating radar, aerial surveys, and chemical analysis techniques that weren't available to earlier researchers. They've found evidence of impact-shattered rock beneath the surface and confirmed the unusual metal spherules. But they've also discovered magnetic anomalies that don't fit the comet theory, and organic compounds that suggest something far more complex than a simple cosmic collision. The Tunguska event remains one of our planet's greatest unsolved mysteries. Whatever struck that remote Siberian forest on that summer morning in 1908 released more energy than the largest hydrogen bombs ever tested. Flattened in area larger than Greater London, and somehow managed to leave almost no trace of its existence. Perhaps that's the most unsettling part of all. In an age where we can detect planets orbiting distant stars and peer back to the birth of the universe, we still cannot definitively explain what happened in our own backyard little more than a century ago. The wilderness of Siberia keeps its secrets well.